Hey folks, it's Leah. Thanks for joining me today. I get the question sometimes, why don't you want to lose weight? I've been pretty vocal on this channel about not prioritizing becoming thinner. I'm just not especially interested in becoming thinner. People often want to know why that is, like why I made that choice. Now, that's a pretty personal question because people's motivations are as unique as people are. There's so many different people and so many different perspectives and life situations and values and beliefs. It would be impossible for my exact motivations to be the same as someone else's motivations. I don't think it's appropriate for me to share that information because I'm really not comfortable sharing my specific personal motivations for that decision. But I do think that we can talk about why someone might make that decision. Some information that might make that decision a rational decision. It's something that I think is fairly general and can apply to a lot of different people who make that decision without getting into like the nitty-gritty of my personal life. I'm going to go over a couple of reasons why someone might not want to become thinner. The first reason why someone might not want to become thinner is that they're happy with their appearance as they are. This may be difficult for some people to believe, but there are people who are my size, larger than me, a little smaller than me, extremely smaller than me, extremely thin, extremely fat, extremely tall, extremely short, who are really happy with their appearance despite pressures from people other than themselves to change their appearance or bullying that they might experience because they're too tall, too fat, too short, too thin, whatever it might be. People can still sometimes be like, you know what? I really like the way I look. We see this all the time. There are people who will get really extreme cosmetic procedures done that lots of people are like, oh my God, that is bananas. I would never want to look that way. But they do. They do want to look that way and they're happy with that appearance, and there's really no reason for us to make it our business if they're happy with the choice that they're making. Lots of people say all the time, well, who would want to be fat, or like no one wants to look that way, whatever. That's not true. There are people who are like, you know what? I'm digging it. I really like the way I look. That might be a reason they don't want to become thinner. Another reason why people might not want to get thinner is that they are valuing their health over their appearance. You heard that right, that it is healthier for them to stay fat. There is plenty of research that tells us that there are health problems that can arise from attempting to become thinner through regular prescribed methods like diet and exercise. I'm going to read from an article written by Lindo Bacon some years ago in the Nutrition Journal. This is a section where they're addressing assumptions around fatness, and this particular section is addressing the idea that fatness causes increased mortality. It says, most epidemiological studies find that people who are overweight or moderately obese live at least as long as normal weight people and often longer. Analysis of the National Health and Nutrition Examination Surveys 1, 2, and 3, which followed the largest nationally representative cohort of United States adults, determined that greatest longevity was in the overweight category. As per the report published in the Journal of the American Medical Association and reviewed and approved by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the National Cancer Institute, quote, this finding is consistent with other results reported in the literature, unquote. Indeed, the most comprehensive review of the research pooled data for over 350,000 subjects from 26 studies and found overweight to be associated with greater longevity than normal weight. More recently, Janssen analyzed data in the elderly, also from 26 published studies, and similarly found no evidence of excess mortality associated with overweight. The Americans Changing Lives study came to a similar conclusion, indicating that, quote, when socioeconomic and other risk factors were controlled for, obesity is not a significant risk factor for mortality. And for those 55 or older, both overweight and obesity confer a significant decreased risk of mortality. The most recent analysis published in the New England Journal of Medicine concluded that overweight was associated with increased risk, but only arrived at this conclusion after restricting the analysis by excluding 78% of the deaths. They also used a reference category much narrower than the entire normal weight category used by most other studies, which also contributed to making the relative risk for overweight higher. The reason I read this is because everyone's like, if you're fat, you're unhealthy. No one's out here saying that if you're fat, you're actually healthier until we actually look at this and we're like, wait a second, people actually die less if they're fatter. But even if we just adopt the idea that fatness is neutral, everyone's being like, no. They arrived at the conclusion that overweight was associated with increased risk, but only arrived there by excluding 78% of the deaths. And they also used a reference category much narrower than the entire normal weight category used by most other studies. Like, to arrive at that conclusion, you have to manipulate the data so hard. And I think this is really important to recognize. The person writing this article has a PhD. Like, this is not a dumb person, right? The person writing this article is looking at other people's research and being like, they done messed up. Like, this is not normal in research. There's another section I really wanted to look at. This is from the same article published by Lindo Bacon and their colleague from Nutrition Journal. And it says, dieting and other weight loss behaviors are popular in the general population and widely encouraged in public health policy and healthcare practice as a solution for the problem of obesity. There is increasing concern about the endemic misrepresentation of evidence in these weight management policies. Researchers have demonstrated ways in which bias and convention interfere with robust scientific reasoning, such that obesity research seems to, and I quote, enjoy special immunity from accepted standards in clinical practice and publishing ethics. End quote. This section discusses the assumptions that underlie the current weight-focused paradigm, presenting evidence that contests their scientific merit and challenges the value of promoting weight management as a public health measure. This is basically someone saying scientific convention, all the stuff that we put in place so that our scientific studies are valid and can be reproduced and have actual scientific merit and are evidence-based, that stuff goes out the window when we're researching fat people. That's what this paragraph says. Let me read that quote again. Researchers have demonstrated ways in which bias and convention interfere with robust scientific reasoning, such that obesity research seems to, quote, enjoy special immunity from accepted standards in clinical practice and publishing ethics. And this is cited. This is not even Lindo Bacon saying this. This is another academic saying this. Where then is all of this panic about how you're going to die if you're fat? Where does it come from then? If people are being intellectually honest and they're publishing good research that shows it, why are there people saying here, when people start studying fat people, they throw all that reasoning out the window and it's all bias? Why are academics saying that if there's really all of this reason to be scared you're going to die because you're fat? It just blows my mind. So then I just want to address one other related thing. You know, people might say that, well, fatness might not kill you, but it'll make you at higher risk for other things that will kill you. Comorbidity is what they call it in medicine. So like, you're fat, therefore you're more likely to get this other condition. Here is what the article says. While it is well established that obesity is associated, emphasis not mine, with increased risk for many diseases, causation is less well established. Epidemiological studies rarely acknowledge factors like fitness, activity, nutrient intake, weight cycling, or socioeconomic status when considering connections between weight and disease. Yet all play a role in determining health risk. When studies do control for these factors, increased risk of disease disappears or is significantly reduced. Let me read that part again. When studies do control for these factors, increased risk of disease disappears or is significantly reduced. So basically, if we have honest, intellectually sound research where they control for all of these other possible risks that we know about, and the ones listed here are fitness, activity, nutrient intake, weight cycling, weight cycling is when you go on a diet, you lose a bit of weight, but then the diet stops working and then you gain it all back and then you do it over and over again. That's weight cycling. Or socioeconomic status. Those are pretty significant factors. We're saying things like, just like eat well and exercise and you'll lose weight. Well, these studies aren't even controlling for things like fitness, activity, and nutrient intake. That's basically diet and exercise. You're not controlling for diet and exercise in studies where you're talking about fatness as a monolith, where everybody is the same, basically. You're putting in that category people who are super active and eating really nutritionally dense diets where it's like really, really great nourishing food that's giving them tons of vitamins and proteins and all these amazing things they need. You're putting these people in the same category as people who aren't doing any of that. And then you're saying, oh, these fat people they're dying. They're all dying. It's bananas. Dr. Bacon goes on to say, it's likely that these other factors increase disease risk at the same time that they increase the risk of weight gain. So one thing causes the risk of, say, heart disease, and that thing also causes a risk of weight gain. That's what that sentence is telling us. Consider weight cycling as an example. Attempts to lose weight typically result in weight cycling, and such attempts are more common among obese individuals. Right. You're not trying to lose weight if you're thin. Well, you might be, but not as persistently as if you're fat, right? If you're fat throughout your life, many, many times, typically you've tried to go on a diet or you've tried to lose weight or whatever. That's just a reality. There's not as much pressure on thin people to do those things. Weight cycling results in increased inflammation, which in turn is known to increase risk for many obesity-associated diseases. Other potential mechanisms by which weight cycling contributes to morbidity, that is, other conditions you're likely to get if you're fat, include hypertension, insulin resistance, and dyslipidemia. Research also indicates that weight fluctuation is associated with poorer cardiovascular outcomes and increased mortality risk. Weight cycling can account for all of the excess mortality associated with obesity in both the Framingham Heart Study and the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. It may be, therefore, that the association between weight and health risk can be better attributed to weight cycling than adiposity itself. Adiposity is being fat. Adipose tissue is fat. It's like a fancy word for fat. So basically, Dr. Bacon is like, they haven't teased apart at all the impact of weight cycling, which we know is quite bad. Weight cycling could very well be accounting for all of these discrepancies between fat people dying more or having these conditions more. And nobody's looked at that. So anyway, this is not to say that the case is closed, like book closed, nothing else to discuss here. Like there's probably lots of research that will come out that will provide more nuance in this area. It's not a black and white issue. But if you are somebody who has been pressured to lose weight and you still choose not to, this could be why. It could be that it's not that you're like, no, like I know that I'm going to die, but I want to die anyway. Right? Like people seem to treat fat people like if they make the decision not to lose weight, they're voluntarily gonna like die a terrible young death. But the reality is that they might actually just be more educated about it than you are. Fat people tend to hear about this stuff all the time, so they're more likely to go down a rabbit hole and find all of this research where they're like, actually, we don't know anything. If the option is to be happy with the way you are, to not decide to become thinner voluntarily, to not like put effort into that, that's one option. And the other option is to try and fail, and also, because you're weight cycling, damage your body or potentially damage your health. It's a pretty rational decision to be like, you know what, I'm just going to be happy where I am. I'm going to do my best to make healthy choices. I'm going to do my best to live a lifestyle where I promote wellness for myself by choosing to eat certain things, do certain activities. Maybe I don't smoke. Maybe I don't drink. Maybe I, whatever it might be, those things that I can easily control, I'll do. And maybe all that shit about being fat, I'm going to just put it over here on the shelf and not worry about it too much. That's why I wanted to talk about sort of the health component here, because it is so much less black and white than people present it. And it is a totally rational decision. If you know this research and what people are publishing now about weight stigma and about weight cycling and all of this different stuff, it's perfectly fine to see that and say, oh, maybe I shouldn't worry about this so much. A third reason why people may choose not to try to become thinner is for socioeconomic reasons. Maybe they don't have a lot of access to financial resources. It can be really expensive to completely overhaul your daily routine. If you're working a lot, for example, you may not have a lot of time to go to a gym or to work physical activity into your day. If you are in an area where there isn't access to a lot of fresh food, maybe you have to eat processed foods. There's a lot of different factors that can affect stuff where it's not super easy to make those choices. And so it makes a lot of sense if you're in that situation to be like, you know what? I'm just going to decide not to prioritize that. That can be a decision people make for their own mental health. And honestly, there are certain social groups where it's okay to just sort of prioritize that. And like, there isn't a lot of punishment from like the people around you. And it could be that like, you have come to identify with that group of people and you're well accepted in that group and that's what matters to you. And everything else, you're kind of like, it can go to hell. I'm thinking about, not that fatness is necessarily a disability. I know there are people who are sort of angling to get fatness declared a disability, but I was thinking about somebody who I had read about who couldn't hear. They were deaf. They had basically been presented with this option to get a procedure to be able to hear. They had said actually it was a really fraught decision for them because we often look at disability as like, oh yeah, like it's a terrible thing. No one should want to be disabled. Like, why would you not jump at that? It's like often the narrative we hear. But in reality, this person was like, everyone I know, we sign to each other. We have this little like culture. I'm so well loved and accepted in this community. I kind of want to stay the way I am. I want to just like continue to embrace who I am. I want to kind of stay in this community where people respect me and love me and see me for who I am. I don't feel a need to change something about me just because the world is trying to tell me that there's something wrong with me. I really actually identify with that quite well. Like, I can see how someone would feel that way, you know? Like, it's sort of like when you're queer and it's like, why don't you, like, so I'm bi and people are like, you could just be with a cis man and you could like pass for straight and then you wouldn't have to seem queer anymore. And I'm like, why would I do that? Like, the queer community has been amazing to me. The queer community is home for me. The idea of being less queer or appearing less queer is not at all appealing to me. There's nothing wrong with being queer, just like there's nothing wrong with being deaf and there's nothing wrong with being fat. If it's what makes you happy, if you've found your place in the world, you may not want to change that. And so some people might make that choice that they're just not interested. They're not interested in becoming thinner and they're not interested in any kind of social consequences that might come with that. Like, for example, not being able to commiserate with your other fat friends about their experiences anymore because you're not fat anymore. There are a million little things that make us connect with other people. And if your fatness is part of that, it's going to be really hard for you to want to change that. So this has just been a few reasons why people might choose not to become thinner, even if they have the option. Maybe weight loss is not something that they want to prioritize. I just wanted to talk about why that might be a perfectly reasonable, perfectly rational decision for some people. Currently in the narrative, all we hear is fatness is terrible, it's bad for your health, it makes you look bad, like all of these different negative associations with fatness. And I really think it's important to look at the other side of the coin and try to understand why some people might not feel that way. A lot of these things that I've discussed today are also part of what I feel. Not all of them are, but as I say, you know, when people ask me, why don't you want to lose weight? It's such a personal question and every single person is going to have such a different answer that I really thought that the best way to approach answering that question was just to look at what are some reasons that are perfectly reasonable that someone might feel that way. And so that's what I've tried to do today. I hope that I've been fair. I hope that I've been informative to anybody who was wondering how I might answer that question. Some of the things here are not things that I feel personally, and some of these feelings that I do have are not reflected in this video. Obviously, the answer isn't complete and it isn't a one-to-one representation of my personal feelings, but I thought it was important to just kind of put that out there as sort of a narrative that goes against the mainstream narrative of you are fat, therefore you must want to lose weight. So thank you for joining me today for this video. I had a lot of fun making it and I really appreciate all your support. Thank thank you for your comments and your shares and your likes and your subscriptions to the channel, which reminds me, don't forget to like this video if you got something out of it. And please do subscribe if you'd like to get notifications when I upload videos. You can put the little notification bell on and you'll get a notification every Wednesday when I upload videos. Looking forward to see you in the next one. Thanks for joining me today. Bye-bye for now.